Namaskar and welcome to NFL Masala. I'm your co-host Anant.
And I'm here, the co-host Rockshock. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 10.
Mm-hmm.
And ladies and gentlemen of NFL Masala, where we talk about all the latest happenings in the NFL with a little bit of spice.
We are 2 to 3 weeks away from the start of NFL regular season football.
Oh my goodness!
Am I excited?
Almost there.
Almost there till you have to face 0-1.
Almost there until you guys realize how much of a hype that this is, and that that April Fools have already went past, and you'll be hit back to something called reality, which is 0-1 start for the Packers.
Okay. So we'll be with the 0-1 start. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see. Alrighty. Before we get to that, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, and that is the AFC South division. This is going to be the second AFC division that we're going to talk about. Let's get started. And before we do that, some Dhamakadar news. First bit of news is that recently Arden Key, the linebacker for the Tennessee Titans, had a 6-game suspension against under the NFL's performance-enhancing drug policies, or PED policy. And fortunately for him, it has been overturned. So he will be able to start as soon as possible. And yeah, that's good because he's a key cog. A key cog in the Tennessee Titans' rushing defense. So yeah, that's why I brought this out. You got Tennessee Titans reference, and you got the key to the Titans' rush defense.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Rakshak is like, why did I make a mistake of joining this podcast?
No, it's like I'm happy with puns, but it's like the minute this happened, I'm like,
yeah,
I question all my life choices. And speaking of which, we do have some very shocking news. And although this was an athletic piece, and I don't have a free account, so I wasn't able to open it. But I do have an update, but SportsCenter has also covered this. So this is according to Stephen Douglas, not the politician who debated Abraham Lincoln. This is the guy. There's an actual guy named Stephen Douglas from SportsCenter, and he said this. No, he said this on Sports Illustrated. Actually, an article stated that that ESPN apparently fired Robert Griffin III and Samantha Ponder, according to The Athletic from Andrew Marchand, and apparently they were strictly budgetary.
Okay, strictly budgetary.
I don't know about this.
It's got to be this picture. Let me share my screen here.
But join us.
Oh yeah, exactly.
We're the new, like as Draymond Green said, we're the new media right here, baby.
Exactly. And for your comment about me being high on cocaine, I am not. I am high on Eagles losing highlights.
Oh man.
Yes, sir.
I see how it is. And because of that, Anand, because of what you've done, you know what's gonna happen to your team? Are you ready?
What?
I am officially cursing the Green Bay Packers.
You've done it twice already. It hasn't affected us.
I need the trifecta on this.
Okay. All right, we'll see. We're too powerful. The cheese is too powerful.
No, it'll be rotten cheese, man. It ain't gonna be ghee.
Okay. I'll see. I can't wait for that matchup. Alrighty. Let's move on to the next one. And that is free agency signing. Finally, Justin Simmons, the safety, is now signed. He was probably top 10 safety in the league last year, and somehow he was still on the free agency market after Quandre Diggs
Mhm.
was getting signed by the Tennessee Titans. But it is now the Atlanta Falcons who have signed Justin Simmons on just a 1-year contract. For $8 million. He is a 2-time Pro Bowl player, and now he's going to be joining Jesse Bates as the other, I guess, free
Free
safety
safeties. Justin
at this
Simmons will be a
point.
strong safety.
Yeah. So now that safety pair is probably going to be the
It'll
top
actually be
5 in the
really good
league.
now. Falcons actually have a great
Mm-hmm.
defense to work with. And I
Yeah.
was shocked that Howie Roseman didn't make a move for him, but I'm guessing they're at the point where like the Eagles are like, okay, they're okay with their core. And Chauncey Gardner
Mm-hmm.
Johnson, Sidney Brown will be coming back from injury. Reed Blankenship will be there. And of course, the Swiss Army knife in Cooper DeJean. I don't know what the hell is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, the smart idea of putting James Bradbury as safety, which should never happen. And apparently, I've seen some preseason games that Avonte Maddox has been playing in the free safety position. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like you have two army knives to work with. So I think it's something for Vic Fangio to experiment, and I like it. But I mean, Justice Simmons would have been good. And speaking of the Falcons, they weren't done yet because I thought this was pretty funny because the Patriots and the Eagles had a joint training camp session that week.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew
Mm-hmm.
Judon, the linebacker, was getting burnt, like burnt toast. Yeah, no, I
Interesting.
mean, like Jalen Hurts had him beat on a wheel. He like there's one viral play that's been going around with Saquon Barkley running a wheel route. Apparently, I
Mm-hmm.
think Judon was trying to be in coverage on that. I think, and also
Hmm.
Jalen Hurts beat a sack from Judon, and apparently the offensive lineman, and apparently Judon almost got into a fight with someone.
But but
Yeah.
the thing is, Matthew Judon has,
He
like,
still has some.
since 2021, his pressure rate of 15.7% across 3 seasons on the average is 7th best in the entire league, and is better than JJ Watt, or not TJ
Yeah,
Watt.
no, which I agree though, but I think like because of those live practices and and that immediate like offensive power, like firepower that the Eagles are now actually using correctly, thanks to Kellen effing
Mm.
Moore. I can't believe that
Mhm.
this is happening. The fact that we're using motion, it brings a tear to my eye, man. Motion. But anyway,
Yeah,
speaking of
yeah.
which, it was like apparently there's like some disputes happening, and with that, the Patriots decide to trade Matthew Judon to the Falcons in exchange for a 2025 third round pick. And I
Mhm.
think it's and apparently he skipped organizational activities ahead of the 2023 season. Patriots reworked his deal, increasing his guaranteed money from 2 million to 14. He only appeared in 4 games due to injuries, and he did have 4 sacks in these games. So I think like it's a great signing for the Falcons. Much better on their defense. I wish they could have. I mean, had they gotten Dallas Turner, I don't think they would have needed to do that. But because
Mhm.
of that, they're gonna keep up with Judon. So I mean, they'll probably go. I'm guessing it's gonna be a 1-year vet minimum. So
Mm. Or maybe just I think, let me see his contract
sure.
right now. I believe, actually, transactions. Matthew Judon, where are you? There we go. Mm, there we go. Okay, so I think he has he has a $6.7 million cap
Ooh.
hit in the
Mm-hmm.
next year. So yeah, so this year he's on the last year of his contract, and he's 32 years old. So most likely he's probably going to be extended, like you said, to maybe a 1-year deal or maybe a 2-year
Right.
deal. Because his contract would be a unrestricted free agent at the end of the next year. So if they were to, I don't know, if they were to extend him to like a 1-year $12 million deal or like a 2-year $25 million deal, kind of similar to what Daniil
Yep.
Hunter got, um, then that might be the most effective transaction for Matthew Judon and the Falcons. But we'll see. We'll see based on his performance this year, because the Falcons, they need pass rush.
Could have fixed it in the
They
draft, but nope. But no, they could have fixed it in the draft,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
that's none of my business.
Um. Mhm. Alrighty. Uh. All right. So let's get started with
All right,
the
with the AFC
uh.
South, let's get it.
Yes, sir. All right. The first team, unfortunately, is the Titans. And they didn't do a good job last year. And you know what
What
could
could
have
have helped?
helped? Who could have helped? AJ Brown. They're still missing him. And yeah, they had D Hop, but they still had a lack of a number one wide receiver, even though D Hop was there for several games and he was their leading wide receiver for several stretches. But it really reflects in their passing offense as to how they how much they're missing a starting quarterback and AJ Brown. Okay. 24th in total DVOA last year. 11th in drop percentage. That's something AJ Brown could have
Oh, I
helped with,
wonder.
because you
I
got,
wonder.
yeah, because besides D Hop, who basically catches everything, you have nobody. You have Nick Westbrook Akine
And
and
Burks.
Traylon Burks, and that's it, right? So 11th in drop percentage, fourth lowest in terms of touchdowns, right? So their wide receivers did not help the quarterback. And not only that, the quarterback was also trash. All right. They had to suffer through like 6 games of Ryan Tannehill, who's basically at the end of his career at this point. And then they decided, okay, let's actually see what the kid has got. Right. So they put in Will Levis, and in his first game against the Atlanta Falcons, I think he was stellar. 4 touchdown passes, and I think 0 interceptions. And I think he broke the record for most amount of touchdown passes for a rookie in his NFL debut. But he threw all 4 touchdown passes, and they were awesome, right? Including a 47-yard bomb, a 61-yard bomb to D Hop in the third quarter. So that performance was stellar. What came after that was anything but stellar, right? It was highly inconsistent. He only threw 4 more touchdowns in the entire next 8 games versus 8 picks that he threw. And that resulted in the second lowest on target percentage of throws in the entire league by Tennessee.
I mean, you have to expect that from a rookie.
Justin Fields was more
I
accurate.
mean, but for Will Levis starting off as a rookie, you kind of expected that to happen. Like they'll have like this one great game.
Not to this extent though. So it seems like the scheme was not working to his benefit. They did not have the weapons necessary to help him in that way. And their O-line was absolute garbage last year. Other than Ben Skoron, or not
Peter
Skoronsky.
Skoronsky.
What's that?
Peter Skoronsky?
Huh? Yeah, Peter Skoronsky. So other than Peter Skoronsky, that offensive line gave up the 5th most sacks, highest pressure percentage, and while only being blitzed 155 times, which is the ninth fewest in the entire league. So it's not like they were constantly facing
Mhm.
6-man rushes, 5-man rushes. They were facing 3 to 4-man rushes, and they were giving up the fifth most sacks allowed. So that, the offensive line was not helping Will Levis. He was constantly on the run. He himself was not accurate, which was one of his knocks coming out of college, right? He had a big arm, but he wasn't really accurate in terms of making
Mhm.
precise throws, right? Especially on the move. So we could clearly see that. And his wide receivers sucked, right? So the entire passing offense was bottom third, bottom like 10 actually in the entire league. So not only did their passing offense suck, their passing defense was atrocious as well. Third highest in EPA per play allowed, sixth highest adjusted net yards per attempt, and third highest completion percentage allowed. So they could not put any pressure. They were not successful at defending the pass, and they just did not have the ability of forcing turnovers. Now, one thing that they surprisingly did do well is reduce the amount of passing touchdowns allowed. I think they were top 10 in in touchdowns allowed. So that was
Was it the same
surprising.
Titans team that beat the Jaguars in their final game to allow the Steelers to go to the playoffs?
hmm
Oh my god.
But like if you were to take a look at the stats and the season as a whole, then you clearly see some of the
Yeah.
deficiencies that they had, which was their
Hmm.
passing offense and their passing
Yes.
defense. Now, credit to Carthon, Rand Carthon, I think, or Ray Carthon, who's the GM of
The
the
new
Tennessee
GM, by the
Titans.
way, the old GM got fired because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. So I will get into that in a little bit, but the new GM in his first official act as a GM, right? Well, not his first official act, but his first season as the GM of the Tennessee Titans, he saw the two deficiencies and he was like, okay, we need to attack that. So what did they do? They signed Chidobe Wuzie, 29-year-old corner from Cincinnati to be their number two corner, actually, on a 3-year, $36 million deal. Then they signed probably one of the biggest signings of the entire offseason, L'Jarius Sneed
That was a
from the
big
Kansas City
trade.
Chiefs.
I th-
Well, not a trade, but that was a big signing, I
I
think.
It was a
Or yeah, it was a
trade.
trade, and
I
then they
think
extended
like
him.
that
Yeah.
was the one of the. I didn't expect L'Jarius Sneed to go to the Titans. I thought any other
hmm
team would have made sense, but him going to the Titans.
He followed the money because he was paid 4 years, $76.4 million deal. That came out to a $19.1 million average
Yeah.
annual salary. So he is making money, and he is now the number one corner, right? He is the shutdown corner for this Tennessee
Yep.
Titans defense, and that really helps. They also did sign Quandre Diggs, right, which is a breaking news that we had on a 1-year,
Yep.
$3 million deal. They also signed Jamal Adams for whatever that's worth on a 1-year, $1.3 million deal. So they basically got four key veteran pieces in their
Hmm.
secondary: L'Jarius Sneed, Quandre Diggs, Chidobe Awuzie, and Jamal Adams, and they significantly bolstered that secondary. Now, that was their one of two deficiencies, right? The other deficiency that they had was their wide receiver core and their weapons and their passing offense. So what did they do? So they signed Tyler Boyd on a 1-year, $2.4 million deal, and they signed Calvin Ridley, 4-year, $92 million deal. 4 years,
Damn.
$92 million deal. That's $23 million per year for Calvin Ridley, who is now going to be wide receiver number one for them. They also signed Tony Pollard as their RB. 1/1 and
Yeah,
a
behind
half or
Hassan
like
Haskins,
0.5.
probably.
Yeah, on a 3-year, $21 million deal. They also have Ty Spears, who I think is going to be a good third
Right.
down back for them, as sort of like a change of pace with Tony Pollard being the major receiving back. They also built through the trenches by signing Lloyd Cushenberry, a really good center from Denver, on a 4-year, $50 million
100%.
deal.
Yes.
They also signed a backup tackle in Jerron Christian from Cleveland. So they invested in the offensive line, they invested in the wide receiving core, and they invested in the cornerback core, along with the secondary, along with several other depth pieces in the D line and in their wide receiving core as well. So they did significant moves to bolster the weaknesses, the major deficiencies that they had of last year, which was their passing offense and their passing defense, right? And now the problem is a lot of defensive players, key defensive players for them, left in the offseason. Azeez Al-Shaair, who was like a top 15 linebacker in the entire league, left to Houston, rival Houston, right? To go play for D'Amico Ryans. They also Sean Murphy Bunting also left. You had Danico Autry, and one of the biggest household names for all Tennessee
Oh,
Titans
yes.
fans, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry going to the Dirty Birds and the Ravens was a huge, huge loss because he carried that
He was
offense
offense
for
for the Titans.
for at least the past 2 years. When you saw the downfall of Ryan Tannehill and the inconsistent nature of Will Levis, Derrick Henry was the key. He was the cog in the machine of scoring touchdowns and scoring points for the Tennessee Titans. How much ever they could, it was because of Derrick Henry, and they lose that engine, right? But that's why they made so many key additions to their passing offense, because when they let go of their rushing offense, most of the NFL now is switching over to a pass heavy offense, right? So that's the distinction that they've made. That's why they got a receiving running back in terms of Tony Pollard, right? He can run, especially in terms of like outside zone, but he's not going to be the power back that Derrick Henry was, right? He's not going to get you, the 1 yard, 4th and 1. Everybody's lining in like, 23 personnel and everybody's stacked in for that, HB power, right? He's not going to be the one to get you that. They also lost Christian Fulton to the Chargers. They lost, Terrell Edmonds, a safety, previously from Buffalo to Jacksonville, who we'll talk about a little bit. And they also lost Aaron Brewer, who was their starting center. So they lost some significant key pieces, especially in the defensive side. So we'll see how that fares out for them this year. But other than the players that they did bring in, the biggest change for them was letting go of Mike Vrabel. And I think the reason why they did so is because they recognize that Will Levis, at least for the foreseeable future, is going to be their franchise quarterback. So what helps a young rookie QB? A really good, talented offensive coordinator. And if that offensive coordinator happens to be your head coach, that's even better. Right? You look at how Matt LaFleur has helped Jordan Love become the young quarterback that he is. You see, who's the Bengals head coach? Zach Taylor. How he's been able to help. Joe Burrow, and obviously you see the best example of this, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Right? That combination is killer. And when or if eventually when Steve Spagnuolo retires, that offense is still going to be killer. right? So having a really good head coach or offensive coordinator and quarterback combo is going to be significant for the Titans' future. Now, that's not to say that Mike Vrabel wasn't a good head coach, and he was, but he just wasn't the head coach that they needed for the future, given that they had Will Levis. So that's why they made the change of bringing in Brian Callahan, who was the Cincinnati Bengals' offensive coordinator for the past 5 seasons. And his father is the legendary, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, offensive line coach in NFL history, Bill Callahan, who is now also the Titans offensive line coach. And that is going to be the biggest. It's not going to be Brian Callahan who's going to be the biggest coach for the Tennessee Titans. It's going to be Bill Callahan, because he is going to massively reorganize and revitalize that Tennessee Titans offensive line. So Will Levis will have the best, well, not the best, but one of the best possible playgrounds to explore.
Makes
basically.
sense.
Right? The best launching pad. That's what I meant to say. That's the analogy. So he will have the best launching pad. He has one of the greatest offensive line coaches of all time in Bill Callahan. He has a really good tried and true method in terms of offensive scheme from Brian Callahan. He's got a pretty decent set of wide receivers and other offensive weapons now. He's got a decent defense that will generally give you more chances than not. So he has not the perfect, but as good of a launching pad as you can for rookie QB going into a second year. So we need to see what he can bring. If he's much more consistent and he can show more of those 4 touchdown games versus the Atlanta Falcons versus his other games, then we know we have something. So I'll get into that a little bit. They also brought in Denard Wilson as their defensive coordinator now. He was the defensive backs coach for the Baltimore Ravens last year, and he has 12 years of NFL experience. So this, I think, was a really good hire for them from a defensive standpoint, because he's going to bring that aggressive mentality that we saw with the Ravens, especially that Ravens secondary, with this Titans secondary and Titans defense. So that would be a good hire as well. They also hired Nick Holes as the offensive coordinator, Zach Woodfin as the director of sports performance, and Ainsley Moore as the director of player and family affairs. So that's the major things that they did, was bringing in Brian Callahan and his father Bill Callahan in their respective roles. And Brian Callahan is also the head coach now, and the defensive coordinator, Denard Wilson. I think that was also a good hire for them. All right. In terms of the draft, they did the good thing. They drafted J.C. Latham, big, strong, powerful offensive lineman to play left tackle now. He's 6'6", 342 pounds from Alabama. We know that he is, a powerful mover, especially in the run game. Yeah. They have Peter Skoronski coming in as in his second year. Lloyd Cushenberry, their recent recent free agency signing, so they have that. And they also bolstered their defensive line by getting Tavondre Sweat from UT to be their starting nose tackle opposite Jeffrey Simmons. So that's going to be a very feisty defensive line, especially against the run. The Tennessee Titans already had like a top 3 rush defenses in terms of not allowing teams to run against them. This is going to be the number one now, because you got Tavondre Sweat at like 340 pounds or something like that. Never mind. 6'4", 362 pounds, right? Just eating up space. You got Jeffrey Simmons, who already is like the top 2 or 3, run stopping defensive lineman in the entire league, pass rushing defensive lineman as well, right? And you also have, I believe they also have Sebastian Joseph Day, who's also another good run stopper, 6'4", 310. So they basically have a beefy D line in a 3-4 defense. Their lightest guy is Jeffrey Simmons at 6'4", 305 pounds.
Oh my God.
They're basically saying, we dare you to move us. We dare you
Come
to
and take
move
it,
us.
boys.
Yeah. So, so those were the two picks that they made. They didn't have a third round pick. They then got Cedric Gray, linebacker from North Carolina, UNC. So I think he was in like our top five linebacker
Yeah.
prospects. Yeah. And then they got some more depth. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., corner, Jaquan Jackson, wide receiver, James Williams, safety, and Jalen Harrell, edge. So at the end of the day, they have improved on paper. I can definitely say that. They significantly improved their wide receiving core. They significantly improved their secondary. They built through the trenches by getting Lloyd Cushenberry and JC Latham. They hired a really good, promising offensive coordinator, one of the best offensive line coaches, which is significantly important in today's day to help Will Levis succeed. But I don't know if it actually is going to show up. Right? Will Levis be the guy? It all depends on him. So because of that factor and because of looking at historic results and last year's plays and how he played, I don't think they will improve much. I honestly need one more year of development for Will Levis in this, especially in this new scheme, to see how they will perform. So I know Titans fans are going to hate me, but unfortunately, I don't think they win more than like 5 games on the entire year. It's 4-13, 5-12. They end up with the top 5 pick. But hey, this upcoming class has some phenomenal offensive line talent. So you can get rid of Nicholas Petit Frere and get yourself, one of the best right tackles in the draft, or you could go pass rush and get a top tier pass rusher in the next draft as well. So yeah, for me, I don't really expect them to be that good, considering the fact that I just don't know what to expect from Will Levis. If he succeeds, their ceiling could be like wild card. If everything falls in line, if their pass defense gets to like top 15 and their rush defense is already top 2, top 1 in the entire league, then their defense will eventually give the offense many opportunities. And if the offense can at least be average, then I think they could be a wild card team. So that's their ceiling. But unfortunately for me, I'm going to be realistic and go 4-13, 5-12 for them. And for me, the Shandar Player of the Year is going to be Calvin Ridley. He's going to be top 10 in receiving yards in the entire league.
I can see that. All right. With that being said, we move on to the Indianapolis Colts.
Your favorite team.
One of my very favorite teams. One of the favorite teams. Because it started with the hiring of Shane Steichen, Anthony Richardson. What would you expect a low season to be? What would you expect the season to be? Like very low, like let's say 5-6 wins because new players, new QB, new system.
New QB, especially since he got injured in week 4.
Not. Yeah. Guess what? You would go from the previous year 4-12-1 to 9-8.
Yo, he probably should have won
Coach
of the Year last year.
I mean, and they had a chance, and it was so good. They were surprising teams that they actually had a chance to clinch a playoff contention, but they lost to the Texans in the final week, barely. And you know what I have to say? Not bad to that. I thought that was a fun game.
Definitely.
And unfortunately, the one thing that held them back was the injury list. I mean, looking at last year's, if you go up to Wikipedia, type up 2023 Colts season, you look up their IR list, you can literally make a starting roster out of that. And functioning with Gardner Minshew. Hell of a job.
Somehow,
I have to say,
somehow, some way, they found a way.
By the Colts. And I mean, they were 20th in DVOA compared to the previous year, which was 32, ranked 32. 10, I mean, 12 spots up, not bad. I mean, they were 13th in offensive rank, 20th in defensive rank. I say that's a big improvement, and this concepts that Shane Steichen has done, especially with helping Jalen Hurts in that Super Bowl season, and then trying to implement that with Anthony Richardson. I think had Richardson been healthy, I thought it would have been a very interesting last game between the Colts and the Texans. I thought that would have been my game of the year. Because you want to see two young guns slug it out. I'm like, screw defense. Give me all the offensive firepower, right? But with that being said, let's talk about some of the changes that they made. So, where do I begin? I think there were some big free signings that they talk about that they brought in. I think one of them being Kenny Moore, a corner for like a 3-year, $30 million. And then they also brought back the legend that is Joe Flacco. That's probably for like a mentorship role, 1-year deal, minimum 1-year deal. Laquan Treadmill, I think backup wide receiver from the Ravens, another 1-year deal. And I mean, they did re-sign some players like Julian Blackmon, Jannard Avery, Trey Sermon, Taquan Lewis. And I think another big one that they signed was Grover Stewart, reinforcing that defensive tackle spot, 3-year, $39 million. But some of the extensions, re-signing DeForest Buckner, who's been like one of your best defensive players, for 2 years, $46 million. Extending Michael Pittman Jr.
That was a pretty impressive extension, considering, and they got it done early too, right? Considering the way the wide receiver market exploded.
3-year, $70 million. Zaire Franklin, your inside linebacker. You need one of those clogs. You need Defoe Buckner and Zaire Franklin. And for a 3-year, $31.26 million. And then Jack Anderson, backup guard, offensive guard from Texas Tech, maybe. For 1 year, $1.5 million. But then some of the players that were out, Gardner Minshew to the Raiders for like 2 year, $25 million. Zach Moss now goes to Cincinnati in order to replace Joe Mixon. We'll get to that later. Isaiah McKenzie, wide receiver, he goes to the Giants for like a 1-year deal. Jake Martin, 1-year deal, outside linebacker, 1-year deal to the Bears. And Tony Brown, backup to the Browns. But I think like there weren't like any super major trades. But we got to talk about some coaching changes that they made. I thought that it was very interesting to see. They brought assistant defensive back Justin Hamilton, director of sports performance being Mike Minnis, Minnis, defensive line coach as in Charlie Partridge, and pass game coordinator Alex Taney. Alex Taney from the Eagles, long time back.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
I mean, if you look at Justin Hamilton briefly, second year as an NFL coach, first with the Colts. He spent 2023 as a defensive quality control coach for the Titans. And prior to that, he was on staff with his alma mater, Virginia Tech, for 3 years. He was part of the player development and defense before coaching safeties, and then became the defensive coordinator, safeties coach. And he did help develop some NFL draft picks like Caleb Farley and the great Divine Diablo.
Possibly the greatest name to come out of the draft. Divine Diablo.
And then Mike Minnis, He's actually spent the last year with the Eagles sports medicine and performance department. So
Hmm.
he was part of the Eagles coordinator with strength and conditioning in 2021 to 2023. He was helped with strength. So based on what he's done with the Eagles so far from like 2016 to 2023, he could definitely bring that change
Mhm.
in aspect. Yeah, and with that, defensive line coach Charlie Partridge, 3 decades of coaching experience. I think last 7 seasons he was at Pitt, not I think at Pittsburgh, where he served under head coach Pat Narduzzi. I'm talking about Pitt University, like Pittsburgh Panthers, not the Steelers, not the Steelers. He was actually responsible for developing Kalijah Cansey
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
and
So
Trey
that's good.
Hendrickson.
Okay, so when you have players like Kwity Paye, who probably could use some
Oh,
development, Taekwon Lewis, and then now what you're going to talk about in their
yes, and
draft.
pretty soon. And then, of course, last but not least, Alex Taney. The reason why I know about
Mhm.
him because he he was the offensive quality control coach with the Eagles from 2021 and 2022 under
Mm.
Steichen. You'll bring him over, and he was actually the Eagles quarterback coach in 2023 under Brian. Why the hell did he get the offensive coordinator position, Johnson? I mean, but I think like him working under Steichen again, it definitely
Mhm.
helps with this. So
Okay.
I think like some really good moves. But then regarding about Charlie Partridge, guess who he gets to work with? And if we're gonna talk
Mhm.
about the draft, perfect segue into this. I start off with your Ed. The first defensive player I want to say picked in this draft, Layatu Latu.
Yeah, what a selection for them. Just
Oh,
fell into their lap.
like if you want to, I mean, you know, tell me about Layatu Latu for a bit. What do we remember talking about him?
Yeah, so for him, I think he was probably graded as one of the most technically sound pass rushers coming out of the draft, meaning like he could use whatever moves that he had learned in terms of uh, getting overpowering the offensive lineman, the offensive tackle. But he also had a good presence in setting the edge against the run. He was basically overall the most well-rounded pass rusher. He wasn't necessarily the fastest or the strongest, but at 6'5", 265, he was like the ideal pass rusher. And for many people, it was him and then Jared Verse and then like
Yep.
Dallas Turner or like, either one of them being the top. But for a lot of people, Leatu Latu was, one of the I think the best pass rusher coming out of that draft in a stack of talented pass rushers. And the only knock for him was his injury
Right. But
concern.
yeah.
But
But I think
yeah.
like him being behind Quiddy Pay and pressurizing him, it
Mm-hmm.
gives him a little bit of it gives him that edge. And oh my god, then wide receiver, second round, they go with Adonai Mitchell. Adonai
Adonai
Mitchell.
Mitchell. Let's go.
I think he's a good. If I remember, he's a great speedster from UT, and also had 2 championships with Georgia. Uh,
Yeah.
no, no,
Yeah.
no. I'm just
Yeah.
trying,
He
but
did.
like he's great for speed, great hands. I mean, you pair him up with Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce.
He was like second in the 4 yard 40
Oh
yard
my
dash.
God,
Or second or like
top
top
five.
5 in the 40-yard dash because this year or this past combine you had Brian Thomas Jr. and Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy all cracking like 4.43 or something like that.
Just insane. And then,
Yeah.
but then in the third round, they go focus on the Montreal the trenches. They go
Mm-hmm.
tackle Matt Gonsalves, right?
Matt
Matt Goncalves,
Goncalves.
okay, from Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
So he may be seeing a familiar face from Pitt. in Charlie Partridge. So I think
Mhm.
like just looking at the roster on no, he's on the offensive side, offensive tackle, and then you go center, Tanor Bortolini. It sounds so Italian, but
Yeah. Bortolini was, I think, one of my
yeah,
targets in the fourth or
right.
fifth round for us to get for the Packers because he had the movement ability that we
Mhm.
were looking at, and he also had some of the athleticism that we were looking at. But unfortunately, he was drafted by the
And I think
Colts.
like he's kind of questionable at the moment, but he could play guard and center, but he'll be behind Ryan Kelly
Mhm.
and Quinn Nelson, so it'll take some time. And then then they go on number 5. They double up with wide receiver by getting Anthony Gold. I thought that was that's a good pick as well to have, building up on the wide receiver depth chart. Chase Tucker is gonna have fun. But then
Mhm.
in their last last two fifth round picks, they go Jalen Carlisles from
Mhm.
Mizzou and Jalen Simpson from Auburn. Jalen Simpson was the guy I wanted to get because not only does he have that size, he could play a little of that box role, that box safety role, and he's a
Mm.
bit of a thumper, which I'd like to see.
Okay.
But he, but at the moment, he gets to he's in the back of the depth chart at the moment. And then
Okay.
6 and 7 they go cornerback Micah Abram from Marshall, and
Mhm.
defense, and then the last pick they go defensive interior Jonah Lau from Oklahoma OU. And I think with
Mhm.
this, not a bad draft. Season expectations, I'm gonna say they'll still have trouble against like the strong playoff teams, but they could possibly split with the Texans, and somehow against the Jags, they always lose a game. I think they can correct it, but I
Okay.
think, but I'm not sure if they do because you cannot
Mm.
fight history, man. You just can't. And Texans, I think they can give them a run for their money, which I'm going to probably have it. I think if Anthony Richardson's healthy, that defense is
Mhm.
clicking. That,
That's the
that
key. Anthony Richardson has to be
right.
healthy. He can outperform Jalen Hurts next year if
Oh,
he is.
100%. I think so.
Okay. I thought you were gonna disagree,
Oh no,
but
Jalen Hurts will
okay.
take it up to another level with Kellen Moore, but yeah, let's see. But
Oh,
I
okay,
think
okay.
it's going to be very tough based on the schedule. So I think they may still go 9-8, and of
Mhm.
course the struggle against like the strong playoff teams. But if they can edge out to a 10-7, I say that's a great success. They can go, and I
Mhm.
think and I pray to God that they go for a playoff contention. Man, I want to see the Colts in the playoffs.
It would be very fun, especially if they have like a wild card spot between the Texans
Mm-hmm.
and the Colts. That would
No,
be exciting.
fight to the
Anthony
death.
Richardson versus
That's
CJ
what we
Stroud.
want.
Yes. Fight to the
And
death.
Chandler played the year Anthony
Alrighty.
Richardson.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. So great analysis as always, Rakshak. Thank you for that. Thank you for all the hope that we're going to provide for all the Colts fans. But one team that I don't think has a lot of hope or is kind of iffy is Jaguars. Our Jaguars fans, they just had to witness the enigma known as the Jaguars. And this past season was the reason why they're known as the enigma because they produced the largest choke job during an NFL season that I have ever seen.
Bet bigger than 28-3.
Bigger than the Eagles last year.
Oh!
Last year, the Jags started 8 and
Oh
3
no.
and they ended up missing the
Oh
playoffs,
my.
going 9 and 8. That is definitely bigger than the Eagles because the Eagles, they still ended up in the playoffs, but
Barely.
barely, but still they ended up in the playoffs. The Jaguars had the division lead and they lost the division lead to the Texans and ended up not even making the
by
playoffs
losing it to the
because of that.
Steelers, by losing the Titans, which allowed the Pittsburgh Steelers to go to the,
I,
and that is why the Pittsburgh
dude,
Steelers went to
that
the
was
Super Bowl via tickets.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. The power was real. The power of black magic
The
was real for the
bullshit of
Steelers last
Steelers
year.
football, it's undeniable.
Yeah, yeah. And we all thought that it was going to be like, a good passing offense with Trevor Lawrence. But no, Dougie P and Trevor Lawrence refused to produce a respectable passing offense. It was 14th in pass DVOA, mid, 14th in EPA per play, mid, 12th lowest in terms of total passing
below
touchdowns, below mid, second lowest pocket time available, which means either they were throwing it extremely quickly or they just did not have the time to throw. Right? So that was way below mid, and they were definition of middle of the pack in terms of sacks allowed. So not only did they not have a good or effective passing game, yes, mid. They were mid. Yes. But dude, their rushing game was so
what the hell
bad.
was the rush game?
They could not produce anything sustainable. 30th in rush EPA per play, 30th least in terms of running back yards. So how much the running back contributed to their rushing totals, and second lowest in adjusted line yards. So basically their offensive line contributed little, or contributed little to their rushing effort, and their running backs also contributed very low in term when compared to the rest of the NFL. So their rushing game was one of the worst in the entire league. And you could clearly see that when you go back and watch the film. Like, they were not able to produce consistent rushing games. Yeah, Travis Etienne ended up with 1,000 rushing yards on the season, but it was inconsistent. That's the problem with the Jags. They were so inconsistent, which is the definition of mid. It is sometimes good, sometimes bad. And that's exactly what the Jaguars were. And their defense produced the same effort. 8th lowest in terms of sacks, 6th lowest in terms of sack percentage, 16th in adjusted net yards per attempt. So that's literally the middle of the pack. 12th highest in pressure rate, but that's because they were the 9th highest in blitz rate. So it's not like their front four was getting any pressure. Like, their front four was not getting enough pressure, which is why the defense had to blitz so much. And the 5th highest in missed tackles. They had 127 missed tackles last year.
That's just insane.
That's not going to help. So that's why they went 9-8. Because the defense could not perform in critical situations, and the offense could not perform in critical situations. Now, what did they do about it? I don't know. Not like they brought in Gabe Davis as their wide receiver selection after losing Calvin Ridley from Buffalo. Gabe Davis is the definition of a mid receiver. You know why? Because one day he's going to pop off for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then the next 4 games he's going to have like 100 yards combined. Mid. But they let go of Calvin Ridley.
Such a shame.
Then they also got Devin Duvernay, who's fast but mid. They got Ronald Darby, mid. He's 31 years old. Not sure how effective he's going to be. And probably the most confounding free agency signing I've seen. Darnell Savage, safety from the Packers. And we let go of Darnell Savage despite having probably the worst safety room in the entire league. That's how bad our safety room was, and that's how bad Darnell Savage was. We didn't even bother to pay him, and they paid him 3-year, $21.75 million. Do you know where that places him at? I guess that's not free safety. What? Did they not? Is he listed as cornerback? Hold up. Oh, it's just regular safety. Okay. That puts him at 18th in the entire league.
Mid.
He's not going to be effective for you guys. We had to let him go. And our safety room was horrific. I just don't understand.
I don't get it.
They also brought in, now they did a good job in signing Eric Armstead, who's going to be their standout rushing defense, rush D lineman, interior presence, with Joshua Hines Allen as the pass rusher, right? Who's going to set the edge for them. But other than that, nothing much really in terms of depth. I don't see many quality depth players here. Trey Flowers, maybe, but he's 31 years old. Ronald Darby, maybe, but he's 31 years old. Darnell Savage, he's a good depth, but you're paying him to be your starting safety, which he is not. Darnell Savage is a good like nickel corner and potential box safety in certain situations, but he's not good other than any of that, right? They also brought in Terrell Edmonds, and yeah, they also had to let go of okay, so those were their free agency signings, right? Now, the reason why they couldn't afford to bring in so many quality and key players like L'Jarius Sneed, for example, is because they had to pay Trevor Lawrence. And for some reason, they gave that man 5 years, $275 million after having not proven anything. He has not proven anything. And they gave him $55 million per year.
My goodness.
Dumb. Okay. Josh Allen deserved 5 years, but $141 million to be their star pass rusher. And that's good because he's a top 5 pass rusher. They also gave Tyson Campbell, a stud young corner, 4 years, $76.5 million. Okay. Foyesade Aluakon, who's I think they're starting inside linebacker, 3 years, $30 million. Ezra Cleveland, a mid guard, which ended up having a terrible performance for the Jags last year in terms of their offensive line performance, a 3-year, $24 million extension. So they gave so much money out to their existing players. They couldn't keep their star players like Calvin Ridley. They had to let him go. They had to let go of Fule Fatukasi, who's a depth defensive lineman. They had to let go of Kayvon Chason. They had to let go of Dwayne Smoot. They had to let go of Zay Jones, Joey Sly, Trey Herndon. So they had to let go of a lot of their players. And they didn't, it was difficult to bring in new players because they had to pay so much money to their existing players. Right, especially that Trevor Lawrence deal. I think that killed them, because if they had given Trevor Lawrence his extension, maybe if they had picked up his 5th-year option, they probably could have retained Calvin Ridley, and that would have been significant. Because guess who they drafted? They drafted Brian Thomas Jr., which I think was one of the best draft picks that they could have made. And they got 100%. Him. But imagine if he was there as a number 2 besides Calvin Ridley. That would have been fantastic. But now
that would have been great.
Now he's forced to be their number 1 wide receiver, which I don't think is the role for Brian Thomas Jr. Because they also have Christian Kirk, but Christian Kirk is more of a slot receiver than he is an outside
Christian Kirk's
receiver.
Somewhat questionable because I believe he may have gotten hurt.
Yeah. And he only had 787 yards last year on 85 targets.
Insane.
That's not what you expect from your number one receiver. You expect that from your number 2 or 3 receiver. So they now have Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Parker Washington, Devin Duvernay as their top 5. That is not that's not a good
No,
top 5. That's not good depth. I would have much rather preferred if they had not signed Gabe Davis and given Trevor Lawrence his not given Trevor Lawrence his extension and rather picked up the 5th-year option and given retained Calvin Ridley, because that way you could have had an actually killer wide receiving core in Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, and Brian Thomas Jr. Then you give defenses headache because you also have Travis Etienne as a receiving option. You also have Evan Ingram as a really good receiving tight end. Yeah, he's 29 years old, but he was still pretty effective. Somehow he got into the Pro Bowl last year, but he was still pretty effective. So they got Brian Thomas. They drafted him. They drafted Mason Smith, the D tackle. They also drafted Jarrian Jones, who I think was one of a really good selection. I really do commend them for that. Javon Foster, tackle from Missouri. Jordan Jefferson, D tackle from LSU. So they got the starting defensive tackles for the LSU team last year. And they got some depth pieces. They got Cam Little in the 6th round, who's a kicker. So, and they got your guy out of Texas Tech, Miles Cole. So tell us about him.
Miles Cole from Texas Tech. If I were to, he will usually play somewhat of like an outside linebacker. I mean, technically, it's like an outside linebacker type, but his best position is the edge. And from what I've seen, he does bring in a lot of power and that quick bull rush. So it's definite. So I mean, if you want to see him get to the quarterback, he can definitely do that. But I think the one thing that may go up against him would be that size.
Okay. So it's going against him?
It might go against him, but I'm surprised to see that he's like more towards the wait, technically he's a 6'6", 280 guy, but I think like he does have the length and the athleticism, and he just needs a little bit more power, and he can get to that pass rush. He can get to the quarterback, but needs a little bit more power.
Gotcha. All right. So with that being said, they did. If this is all that they were able to get, one last bit of change that they made in the offseason was in their coaching staff, and that is firing their existing defensive coordinator, which is going to help considering they got in Ryan Nielsen. Now, Ryan Nielsen, who was the I think 7 or like 5 years with the Atlanta Falcons or something like, around that time, he produced one of the top like 10 rushing defenses in the league, especially last year with the Falcons. So that was a good hire for them. They also got Chris Richard, who was the DB coach from Cowboys.
Cowboyville, man. Chris Richard is underrated. Yeah. He's good.
Exactly. So those were 2 good moves that they made. I think they also got here. Yeah. Other than that, just a couple of depth coaches. Now, having Ryan Nielsen and Chris Richard is going to help them in their defensive output, specifically against the run. But I am not sure what this offense could produce, because Trevor Lawrence last year was inconsistent. They got rid of his number 1 wide receiver in Calvin Ridley. They brought in a deep threat who doesn't really have the full toolkit to become a number 1 wide receiver, at least not now. And for the Jaguars, and for Dougie P more specifically, they need to perform right now. This is the year that they have to perform, get into the playoffs, and show that they can be like this quarterback and head coach combination is going to be the future of Jacksonville. Because if they can't improve this year, if they can't improve their rushing offense this year, and I'm not sure that they did on paper because they didn't really improve their offensive line, they didn't bring in another running back to buttress Travis Etienne's role. They didn't really help, you know, uh, you know, bring in like another a good offensive line coach or bring in maybe another offensive coordinator. So I'm not sure if this offense can be productive enough or consistent enough to be a playoff threat. And because of the amount of changes that have been made on this offense, I can't trust it, and that's why I'm saying that they go 7-10.
Fair enough.
Because I just don't know what to expect from the Jags next year. I just don't know how consistent Trevor Lawrence is going to be, and this rushing offense that's going to be the key to their success next year.
I know. I do see that.
So, yeah. And then for me, the Shandar Player of the Year is going to be Josh Allen, pass rusher, top 5 in sacks as he was last year. I think he was second in sacks behind TJ Watt or something like that. I think he had like 17 and a half sacks or something. 17 and a half sacks last year. So he was like top 5 in sacks last year. He was tied second. Never mind. So he's going to be top 5 in sacks again this year, especially with Ryan Nielsen, and he's going to be up there in tackles for loss as well. But I don't know, man. I just don't trust this team. I just don't.
You
trust
know, like
them
how
at
we
all.
have that song, "We Don't Trust Bruno, We Don't Trust Jackson, We Don't Trust Duval."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tony Khan better do something. I mean, I get that he wants to focus on Fulham and AEW, but come on.
No, but this is on Dougie P and Trevor Lawrence. If they can't fix this up, then and Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke.
Come on, man. You got to do something.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
With that being said, last but not least, we go to the Houston Texans. If I was talking to say something about the Indianapolis Colts being an understatement, the biggest understatement of them all was the Houston Texans. I mean, they took us by surprise last season by first getting CJ Epping Stroud. He has injected adrenaline to the city of Houston when it comes to football itself. And he led them to an AFC South Division title and a wild card win against the Browns before losing to the Ravens. I mean, you had a team in which had both offensive and defensive rookies, CJ Stroud and Will Anderson Jr. A hell of a season. And you showed some sparks on an offense and rebuilding defense led by head coach DeMeco Ryans. Hell of a job. One hell of a job. And with that, I mean, if you wanted to get more stats, the Texans were ranked. They were ranked number 13 in ESPN in total offensive yards, averaging 342 yards per game. Passing yards, five below 250 per game. Rushing, they could have done a little bit better because they were focusing on CJ Stroud's cannon of an arm and his ability to learn quickly. Having still able to retain most of the staff, that has been a great job by the Texans, and keeping Bobby Slowick for another year. Holy crap. Having that passing game coordinating from that San Francisco 49ers staff, so damn good. Anywho, let's get on to some of the free agencies that they got. And this is where they still surprise me. they're able to rebuild. They're like, no, we're not done yet. We're gonna focus on a little bit on defense and a little bit on the offense. Defensive side, they take Daniil Hunter from the Vikings for a 2-year, $49 million. Aziz Al-Shair from their rival Titans, 3-year, $34 million. Danico Autry from the Titans again, 2-year, 20. Then they take Tommy Townsend, Hunter from the Chiefs for $26 million. Tim's Foley Fadukazi from the Jags for 1 year, $5.125 million. Jeff Okuda, corner from the Falcons, $4.75 million for 1 year. And oh no, they're not done yet. They managed to re-sign Noah Brown for 1 year, $4 million minimum. CJ Henderson from the Panthers, cornerback depth, 1 year, $2 million. And I mean Derek Barnett, they bring him back for another year. Miles Bryant from the Pats, Mario Edwards, defensive end from the Seahawks. They're able to re-sign Dare Ogumbawale for 1.5 mil. Steve Sims Jr. Then they able to sign like Chris Reed and Cam Richards. I mean, what can you say about the freaking Texans? So damn good. What they also did which was very impressive. They were able to extend a ton of players. I mean, first you bring Joe Mixon and you sign him, extend him for a 3-year, $25.5 million, restructured. Then you extend Nico Collins, 3-year, $72.75 million. Khalil Davis, defensive tackle, 1 year, $1.65 million. And then you extend Eric Murray, Chris Boyd, and I think and probably John Weeks, but also you're extending Dalton Schultz for a 3-year, $36 million deal. And what the hell? Texans have been so good with this, but some of the players that they let go, Jonathan Greenland, signed defensive end with the Vikings for $76 million. Sheldon Rankins, one of their good top defensive tackles. He goes to this Bengals, 2 years, $24.5 million. Blake Cashman, 3 year to the Vikings. Devin Singletary, they basically switched Joe Mixon and they gave Devin Singletary away, which goes to the Giants. George Fant to the Seahawks. Who else? I mean, Kareem Jackson, Tier Tar, Adrian Amos, not that much, but some names. And there was a couple of trades that happened. So so with that being said, we have to take a look. So I think one of the biggest moves that they got was getting Stephon Diggs, trading from the Bills to the Texans for a 2025 fifth round pick and a 24 sixth round pick. And then they also trade and then some draft trades between the Lions and the Eagles. And then also getting Ben Skowronek, wide receiver from the Rams, to the Texans for a 2026 7th round pick for a 2026 6th round pick. So, I mean, that's just super impressive from there. But that was not it. There were a couple of changes in their coaching staff. For example, you had Matt. You had the first one being Zach Yinzer, offensive line coach. He was listed as a newcomer, and then also the Texans added Sean Baker and Mike Snyder as defensive and offensive assistants. And then there was also more. And then also, I think they had defensive coordinator Matt Burke returning back for year 2. I think he's going to, which is also very good as well. So, not too bad so far. Now we gotta talk about the draft. You thought the Texans were done with this. to the freaking no. They said, no, we're going to restock and try and secure a dynasty. And with that dynasty of winning the AFC South, they get in the second round Kamari Lassiter from Georgia. Oh,
Bro, they stole this draft. They did such a good job with this draft.
They're like, oh no, we're not done with this shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that one rapper from India, Hanuman Khan, with that Big Dogs who overtook Eminem and
the entire rap
taking by surprise. Like with Big Dogs, the Texans were big dogs in this one. I mean, they got Kamari Lassiter, Blake Fisher, and third round they go Kalen Bullock. Not a bad.
Oh my God. I wanted him to be on our team, especially since I think the Texans were picking 2 or 3 spots ahead of us. I was like, why did he go there? I wanted this. Like, yeah, I would have been fine with Javon Bullard and, you know, based on his results, but oh my God.
Oh, they're not done yet. Fourth round, they go Cade Stover from Ohio State. Definitely good one to learn under for Dalton Schultz to teach later on. Then you had linebackers. They get Jamal Hill from Oregon. I thought that was decent. And then running back to go Javar Johnson from Louisville. Don't know much about him. But then in 7th round, they go Solomon Bride, edge from USC. Marcus Harris, defensive interior from Auburn. And tackle Ladarius Henderson from Michigan. No, but to go ahead and steal Kamari Lassiter, they should be reported for robbery. I mean,
hey, but you got you know,
no. I'm so impressed with the Texans. They're like, oh no, we want to keep adding more defensive rookie of the years. Like, what the hell? I mean, if my season expectation, what can you say? They're probably going to go 10-7 or
probably
10-7 at minimum. 10-7 minimum. I think they could go 11-6, 12-5 if they're able to pull up those against those super high playoff level teams. And I'm also going to take it a step further. They'll get to the AFC Championship game.
Okay.
I believe they can pull it off. And Shandar Play of the Year, I'm ready for the hate on this one. NFL MVP candidate, CJ Stroud.
Oh, candidate. Okay. Yeah, he's going to be a candidate next year. That's for sure. He's going to be a candidate, but I thought you were saying he's going to win it next year outright.
No. Mahomes is probably going to steal it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's going to be Mahomes with Xavier Worthy and all that.
I texted Bills. Why do you do this?
Anyways, let's get back to the Texans. Let's end it off on a happy note.
That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
I say 10-7 minimum, 12-5 maximum. Sean, and I think they go to the AFC Championship game. MVP candidate is going to be CJ Stroud, Shandar Player of the Year.
Okay. I have a beat the toll moment. So now we're going to be in our final division predictions.
Let's go.
Right? So I'm going to take it one step further and say they make it to the Super Bowl. I am calling it the Texans will make the Super Bowl this year. And the Super Bowl matchup will be CJ Stroud versus Jordan Love. I'm calling it. They go 10-7, but they go through the gauntlet. They beat all the important teams, and they get to the Super Bowl on the backs of this defense reinvigorated offense. It's just gonna be a fun ride for Texans fans. Colts, I'll say they go 9-8 for me. They end up second in the division. 7-10 for Jaguars, and Titans 4-13, 5-12. One of the worst teams in the league, simply because they just need more talent. But Jags beat the Dole moment. They fired Dougie P.
I would
and
not be
Trent Baalke.
surprised.
Yeah.
All right. For my
What about you?
side, the Texans, they'll go 10-7 minimum, 12-5, up to 12-5. AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. It'll be tough because it's Patrick effing Mahomes. I think, but it'll be the best learning experience for CJ Stroud. Colts, they go 9-8. They could be a contender for 10-7 as long as Anthony Richardson, and a wild card spot as long as Anthony Richardson's healthy. And Jags go 7-10. Titans go 5-12. I think Jags, Baalke and Peter and Dougie P. Dougie P is going to retire. He has to.
Retire?
No.
I don't think he'll retire.
I think he'll have to find a better job.
Yeah. I think he might go into the college ranks.
Ooh. I don't know about that.
That might be.
It'll be interesting, but but hey, you know what? If Dougie P wants to call it quits for coaching, that is perfectly fine because he's got one ring with these boys, where he took a backup QB to win against one of the greatest teams with a backup QB, and we did it with a backup QB and a trick play. And and last but not least, Titans go 5-12. It's gonna be rough. It's gonna be rough, but if they can play,
they have the potential to be better. They have the potential to be better than the Jags. I could see a scenario where the Jags end up being the worst team in the division, simply because all the expectations on them it just becomes too much for them, and it all comes crashing down. I could definitely see that. But yeah, realistically, I agree with you. I think we're pretty similar. We're basically similar on everything. But yeah. All righty. So that's going to be it for us today. If you guys have enjoyed, please leave us a review at one of the 4 podcast platforms that we host our podcasts on: Apple, Google, Spotify, and Pocket Cast, or send us an email at nflmasala at gmail.com, spelled as NFL MASALA at gmail.com. Or Rakshak,
you can also find us on Instagram /Twitter/X at the same username at NFL MASALA 2022. And we're also on YouTube, season 3. Check us out.
We're on YouTube. So like, share, subscribe this video. If you guys see it, please leave us a comment on what you think. We already went through a comment war with one of our NFC North fans, a Lions fan, so that's exciting if you guys want to check that out. But yeah, definitely leave like, share, subscribe, make us popular so we can have more spicy takes and we can, take the world down.
I also want to give a special shout out to the other podcast, Swoop Boys Pod. Make sure you check those guys out on YouTube. If you want more Eagles content, make sure you check those guys out.
All righty, and we're gonna hit you guys with our signature outro. Go
and
Pack,
fly, go! Eagles fly. Take care and have a good night.